Read on a logbook here to discuss a lot of the world building and connections in the Danmachi novels, because I've always wanted to make a video like this, because a lot of stuff that happens within the side stories affects the main series, and vice versa. So I just think it would be fun to talk about it. So let's start off with Leafia. Leafia is one of the two main characters in the Sororatoria novels, obviously Eyes being the other. And there's a meme in the Danmachi community that even though she's this super important character, she never shows up in the main series, which is technically mostly true. But she does have brief appearances. She's never actually named. She's referred to as the Blonde Elf. But yeah, she does actually pop up pretty early on in the main series. You see, her first appearance actually happens in Sororatoria, Volume 1. But her second appearance happens a month later in real time with the release of Volume 5 of Danmachi. After Belle, Welf, and Lily are able to survive the middle floors and escape the Goliath, they are then nursed by the Loki Familia for a while. Specifically, Eyes takes care of them. After Belle wakes up, Eyes gives them a tour around their camp. And it is mentioned that this blonde elf is glaring at Belle the entire time because she's jealous of the fact that he gets to spend time with Eyes. It's a very small moment that you would miss, but it does happen. She then pops up again in Danmachi 10 volumes later in Volume 15. This takes place in Hestia's story, where she first enters Aurorio after being kicked out of Hephaestus' home for mooching off for 3 months. Hestia then starts wandering around trying to build a familia, but obviously none of the adventurers want anything to do with her because she's a nobody goddess with 0 familia members. She eventually runs into Loki, who is with several of her familia members, and Leafia is among them. In fact, Leafia actually has a speaking role. She asks Loki who this goddess was, and then Loki just dismisses Hestia like she was trash. She then has a brief appearance again in Volume 18 during the war game. It's mentioned that a short-haired elf, because at this point Leafia had cut her hair, is currently sitting with the Loki Familia watching the war game as it unfolds. I am making this video prior to Volume 21 coming out, but they did drop a preview, which was the prologue and part of the first chapter, where Leafia was in fact mentioned by Belle in Volume 21, because she is currently staring at him, because it is Leafia's goal to team up with Belle at this moment. Once again, this is just a preview, so that's all I know. Volume 21, once again, has not come out yet, so maybe she shows up a lot more in the novel, or maybe that is it, just a small cameo again. The novel comes out in like 5 or 6 days of recording. So yeah, even though it's just small, brief moments, she's still in it, and that's what I mean by these small moments of world building that you would miss if you didn't just read through the novels multiple times like I have. Another good example of this is the Deus Ex Familia and the Miak Familia. The Deus Ex Familia shows up in Sororatoria more often than it does in the main series, because the Deus Ex Familia and the Loki Familia are kind of somewhat a partnership. But they will occasionally show up in the main series. And this is important because the Miak Familia is heavily indebted to the Deus Ex Familia because they had to take out a loan from them to construct Naz's fake arm. Because of this massive debt, they're not able to pay off their bills, and the Deus Ex Familia is actually about to compensate the Blue Pharmacy as collateral for the debt. And so Belle, in the short story, helps Naza get the ingredients she needs to invent the dual potion. It doesn't just heal you, it also restores your mind, so you can continuously use magic. Okay, so after Naza is able to create her potion, she then makes a batch of like 20 of them. Her and Mihawk then go to the Deus Ex Familia directly, and because these potions are so valuable, because they're a one-of-a-kind thing that only Naza can make, they're then able to make a deal where Naza makes the potions, and then the Deus Ex Familia is able to sell them at their shop, where both parties get a cut, and also the Miak Familia is able to slowly pay off their debt. And so this is where the crossover happens, because that 20-pack of dual potions that the Miak Familia gave to the Deus Ex Familia as payment is then given to the Loki Familia in Volume 4 of Sororatoria, right before they go on their expedition to the 59th floor. Once again, it's a very brief, if you aren't paying attention, you'll miss it kind of moments. Okay, so the next thing actually involves Mord. Mord and his buddies decided to gamble all of their savings on Belle during the war game with Apollo. Now, because everyone and their mother basically expected Apollo Familia to win, Mord just walked away with a lot of the cash. Now, Mord and his buddies are irresponsible with money. It is then later revealed in Familia Chronicles Book of Ryu that for years now, Mord and his buddies have spent most of their money over the years in the casinos of Aurorio, using that money to slowly increase their standing with the casinos with higher and higher tiers until eventually they use all of their winnings from the war game to finally get their hands on a VIP gold card, which allows them to go anywhere in any casino with basically no cash limit. And also as VIPs, they basically get the VIP treatment. So more alcohol, better rooms, women, free food. It doesn't really matter. you're a VIP, you get the best. So I just think that's fun to know that that's what Mort and his buddies spent their winnings on. In fact, even to thank Belle for winning all that money for them, they decided to take him to the casino to celebrate getting their gold card. They then end up losing it because of reasons. But hey, they had it for a day at least. Since we're already on the book of Ryu, we might as well talk about this girl here. Her name is Anna. Her father and mother own a flower shop, and also her father has a gambling addiction and drinking addiction. And because he's an alcoholic and a gambling nut, as you can imagine, he bet his own daughter and lost. And so she was handed off to the head of the largest casino in Arroyo. And so the first half of the Book of Ryu is centered around Ryu saving this girl, which she does. While this might be her first appearance, it is not the last. She does show up again in Sword Art Oratoria, Volume 8 to be specific. When Bet and Lena were on their date, in quotations, the two of them actually passed by the flower shop, where Lena then told Bet that these posies were her favorite flowers, and she would fall in love with a man all over again if they ever gave her these flowers. Anna saw that Lena was clearly wanting the flowers, runs over, and actually hands them to Bet so he can then hand them to Lena. And that's not actually the last time we see Anna. She will show up again in Volume 18 of Danmachi. In the main series, she shows up again with her parents cheering for Ryu during the war game when she's fighting against Hagni. Let's continue with Ryu for a bit, because I'm sure many people who watched the anime are confused on how Belle had a key to Noxus. Because in the middle of the Zeno arc, Ween was kidnapped by Dixpernix and the rest of his familia, and so Belle went to go rescue her. When he was doing this, on the 18th floor, him and Fels run up to a wall that they suspect there must be a secret entrance to Noxus, they just can't find it. That is until Belle's bag starts to glow. So Belle pulls out the eye, that is the magic item, that allows you to open up the doors of Noxus. Now, the anime does show, for a brief moment, Ryu handing the bag over to Belle, which means Ryu had the key the whole time. But where did she get the key? Well, that's actually answered in Sword Art Oratoria, Volume 5. So, on the 18th floor, after the peeping incident, Leafia was very angry at Belle, and then more shenanigans happened, and she basically chased him through the woods. The two then ended up in a trap set by Evilis, which was like this acid pit with one of the unique monsters in it. The two of them work together, they kill the monster, but they're both basically drained of all their magic by the time they're done. Obviously, members of Evilis are going to notice when one of their traps explodes, because the two of them blew it up. And so members of Evilis and a bunch of unique monsters, the plant monsters, then attack the two of them. That's when Ryu comes in, she destroys all the monsters, and captures the two members of Evilis. After Belle and Leafia are safe in the hands of the Loki Familia, she then takes the members of Evilis to the side so she can then torture them for information. Before she can get any information out of them, they are then killed by their own allies. But these members of Evilis that were just killed were gatekeepers in that area. That's why there was a pit trap there with a monster, because it was guarding the entrance to Noxus. And so, these members of Evilis had a key. Ryu just sensed that there was magic coming off of it, so she knew it was a magic item, she just didn't know what it was. And so she just stuck it in her bag. And she just held on to it the entire time until eventually she gave her bag to Belle. She actually did not know it was a key to Noxus when she gave it to Belle. Her bag just filled with all kinds of magic items and potions that she figured Belle could use in that emergency situation. But yes, that is where the key came from. That is why Belle had access to Noxus. And since I'm already talking about Noxus and the Xenos, let's just talk about the Xenos. So, in the main series, it very much feels like the Xenos have been sidelined, where after their arc, they basically just show up one more time during the Expedition arc to save everyone, but Sword Art Oratoria, they get so much screen time. They are basically secondary main characters of Sword Art Oratoria. They team up with the Loki Familia to take down Noxus. They are a crucial part of both the second and third battle of Noxus. They're crucial in bringing down the rims of Evilis and also Enno. In fact, Ray, after saving both Elise and Finn's life, actually becomes very close with the members of the Loki Familia. In fact, Elise actually becomes very close friends with Ray. In fact, during Volume 15 of Sword Art Oratoria, when the Loki Familia is annihilated and they're forced to retreat from the deep floors, the Xenos actually go in to save them. Many of the Xenos even sacrifice their lives in the process, and the one who grieves the hardest is actually Elise, who's begs Raoul to help them because she can't handle the fact that the Xenos are dying in their stead. This one I actually think is kind of funny. So the whole ordeal that the Hestia Alliance had to go through on their expedition to the middle floors involving the Juggernaut was actually Hermes' fault. Guild rules state that once a Familia hits rank D, they must go on expeditions if they're a dungeon exploring Familia. Now, the Hestia Familia hit rank D, but there's a caveat. You don't immediately then start going on missions. That's not how they usually do it. They give you a grace period because you just leveled up. The Hestia Familia was not given that grace period. As soon as the Hestia Familia was given the rank of D, they immediately were told to go on an expedition. The reason for that is because of the Second Battle of Noxus. Hermes had a conversation with Oranos where he didn't want Bel anywhere near Noxus. He believed Bel was not ready for this. But if Bel found out that Eyes, the woman he loves, and other people that he respects in the Loki Familia were going to do this dangerous thing, then he might actually volunteer for it. And so Hermes asked Oranos to keep Bel safe by just sending him on an expedition. Oranos, thankful for what Bel and the Hestia Familia just did with the Xenos, he decided, okay, you're right, Hermes, let's keep them out of danger. But at the same time, it was a good thing they actually did make this decision to send them down there, because that meant that Oranos and Fels knew where the Hestia Familia were at when the Juggernaut got released. This is the whole reason why the Xenos were then immediately sent out to save them, because the original plan probably would have been what happened the first time the Juggernaut got released. The guild would have just covered it up, but because the Hestia Familia were the ones in danger, a rescue team was actually sent in to save them. Oh yeah, speaking of Fels, so Fels' first introduction was in Sword Oratoria, Volume 2, but he was actually hinted at in Volume 1 of Sword Oratoria, because we got introduced for the first time to Liana, the owner of the Witch's Hat Secret, that old lady that looks like a witch, whose family for generations have been holding on to Fels' magic items in a stash house for an emergency situation. They were used for the first time by Bel and his family to get the Xenos back into the dungeon, and the second time they were used when Bel was basically running away with Seer on their date during the festival to escape the Freya Familia. But yes, she was actually introduced in Volume 1 of Sword Oratoria. She actually is the personal craftsman who works on Reveria's staffs. Reveria has been going to her ever since she first joined Aurorio, because Liana is actually the best magic craftsman in the city. Well, not counting Asfi and Fels. Reveria doesn't know about Fels, and Asfi is a member of different Familia. Anyway, after this, Leafia also begins to use Liana's services whenever she's dealing with her magic wands. As for the hint I was talking about, when Liana first goes with Reveria to this shop, she actually sees a grimoire. And Reveria's like, Liana, don't tell me you made this. And Liana's like, no. A friend of mine asked me to hold on to it for him. She just likes showing it off as a way to entice people to come into her magic shop. So I'm going to talk about two more things involving Eyes. The first one takes place during the Xeno arc, where Eyes ends up fighting Ryu. And during this fight, Eyes has this sinking feeling that she's fought this person before. Like, she recognizes Ryu's fighting patterns, but she's not able to recall where or when she fought them. We actually get to see where and when. It actually takes place in another novel, a prequel series, Estrella Records, where Ryu, who is 14, and Eyes, who is 10 at the time, end up getting to a fight in the middle of a destroyed warehouse where Ryu's friend Artie was killed. Eyes, at this point in time, was an impulsive brat who just started to attack Ryu because she assumed she was a member of Evilus, and Ryu decided she was going to fight Eyes, and instead of explaining herself, because she was just angry at that moment and she wanted to take her rage out on someone, and the two ended up fighting to a draw because they were both level 3s. And the last thing I want to talk about is Eyes' promise to Freya. Now, when this was brought up in the anime, Season 5, why Eyes wasn't allowed to train Bel, most people who only watched the anime were confused on what this was all about, because the anime doesn't even explain it. Hell, it doesn't even attempt to explain it. You see, what happened in Sword Oratoria, Volume 11, Eyes makes a request of Freya that Otter train her. Freya agrees. In exchange, she gets to give one order to Eyes that she must follow. Now, Eyes was like, no, I'm not going to agree to that. But Freya's like, don't worry, I will not make you do anything unreasonable. And she did, in fact, keep her promise, because all Freya asked for was that Eyes stay away from Bel, at least until the end of the war game. And of course, Eyes agreed to this because, well, she made a promise, so she had to keep it as a warrior. Now, there are plenty more crossover world-building things that happen inside all the novels, but I'm going to end the video here because I feel like I've really explained myself pretty well on just how much Fuji Uemori goes out of his way to make this world as alive and lived in as possible. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, give a thumbs up so you can enjoy more Danmachi and other things. Thank you and have a great day.